Continuing my series of country comparisons, and after comparing Greece and Turkey, then Taiwan and China, as well as Germany and Poland, among others, I thought it would be interesting to compare two other regional rivals, Saudi Arabia and Iran. These countries, despite not sharing a border, are regional neighbors and they don't get along too well, each fighting to be the biggest regional power and influence. So let's learn a little about them and how they differ in many aspects, but also how they are similar in many others, and also how they competitively compare in some key factors. First, the flag. Saudi Arabia's flag is a field of green with a white sword and a white inscription in Arabic reading, "There is no God but God, Muhammad is the messenger of God." The flags of almost all Islamic countries include the color green, as this is seen to be the color of Allah, I think. The flag of Iran also has it, and white, but adds red to it. A horizontal tricolor of green, white, and red with the national emblem also in red, centered on the white band, and the takbir written 11 times each in the Kufic script in white on top of the green and red bands. The takbir is the Arabic name for the phrase "God is the greatest." The flag prior to the Islamic Revolution was, I believe, the same, but instead of the national symbol, it had a lion with a sword and a sun behind it. This current national emblem features 4 curves and a sword surmounted by a shada. These are stylized representation of the word Allah. Saudi Arabia's national emblem is not the one present on its flag, although it also contains a sword, 2 actually, crossed, and above them is a palm tree. The 2 swords represent the kingdom of Hejaz and the Sultanate of Najd, united by the Saudi king in 1926. When it comes to government type, Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy established in 1932 with a post-World War II tradition of close ties to the United States and the United Kingdom. Its regime revolves around the Saudi royal family, the House of Saud, which was founded in 1720. They previously ruled Hejaz and Najd and some other regions prior to the full unification of what is today their territory. The king is both the head of state and head of government. It is an authoritarian regime. The government is also vastly controlled by the royal family, although through different and sometimes opposing factions. Today, and since the Islamic Revolution that took down the monarchy and Persian Shah, Iran is an Islamic republic. But it is also an authoritarian regime. They have 2 key figures, the supreme leader and the president. The supreme leader is the de facto head of state, and he is responsible for the delineation and supervision of the policies of the country. Because of this, the president has limited power. The supreme leader can even issue governmental decrees. He outlines election guidelines and can fire cabinet members. He's also directly involved in the ministries of defense, foreign affairs, and intelligence. Oh, plus he's the leader of the armed forces, so you can understand how much the country's effective power is concentrated in him, arguably to an even greater extent than it is concentrated in Saudi Arabia's king. When it comes to the diplomatic relations of these 2 countries, they're not so great. This is due to several geopolitical issues and rivaling aspirations to be a regional influence to other nations around them. Their oil export policies, along with their relationship with the US and Western nations in general, are also a subject of dispute. Saudi Arabia tends to be closer to the West, even being a direct military ally to some, while Iran is the exact opposite. Diplomatic relations have actually been suspended for various times, namely from 1987 to 1990, or from 2016 onwards after a mob attacked Saudi diplomatic missions in Iran. But in 2023, they were restored through the intermediate of China. But a lot of this rivalry also stems from the fact that they are religiously different, despite both being Muslim. Iran follows Shiite Islam, while Saudi Arabia follows Sunni Islam. The proportions are almost identical but inverted. In Saudi, 90% are Sunni and 10% Shia. In Iran, 94% are Shia and only 5% Sunni. It's a little more complicated than this, but to summarize the basic difference between them, Shia believe that Islam should be led by descendants of Muhammad, while Sunnis believe the leader of Islam should be appointed by election and consensus. Sunnis make up to 90% of the world's Muslim population. The vast majority, and especially Arab countries, are mostly Sunni. I believe only Iran, Iraq, Azerbaijan, and Bahrain have Shia majorities. It's also interesting that both Iran and Saudi have almost 99% of their population following the respective faith, so there's little to no religious diversity in either of them. And despite that restoring of relations, the competitiveness to be the main regional power continues. This, in addition to their rivalry, causes them to be involved in opposite sides of many proxy wars. The two countries have been involved with opposing sides in Syria, Yemen, Bahrain, Lebanon, Qatar, and Iraq, in a very similar situation than that of the Cold War, when proxy wars also happened between the countries supported by the US and USSR. However, as far as I know, the two countries have never been directly involved in a conflict with each other. If they were, this is how their military forces compare, at least according to the data on Wikipedia. Iran's armed forces have a military age of 18 with 600,000 active personnel, the 7th largest in the world, with an additional 350,000 in reserve. They spend 2.5% of their GDP on defense expenses, and they have mandatory military conscription. Saudi Arabia has 480,000 active personnel, the 20th largest in the world, with 60,000 in reserve. Their military age is 17 and they don't have mandatory conscription. They spend up to 7% of their GDP on defense. In fact, they are among the world's biggest defense spenders. Considering they have a smaller number of soldiers, I would guess this expense is going into equipment, training, tanks, cars, airplanes, and ships, which would lead us to believe that despite being smaller than Iran's, Saudi Arabia's armed forces are better equipped. Now, a lot of these country comparison videos involve making pro and con lists for each country, and I love making lists, especially on good notebooks, so I want to tell you guys about a brand of products that I love, Paper Republic. I can't stress this enough, this isn't a sponsorship, although full disclosure, they did send over this product for free, but I was already their customer before, and I really love their products. They have the best leather products, from journals, portfolios, wallets, pen cases, and even pens themselves. You get these fantastic leather covers for your notebooks, which you can personalize with embossing, by the way, and then you can refill them with their awesome paper, available in different weights. Their store is in Vienna, Austria, but you can order any of their products online. If you're in Europe especially, they come really quickly, and I would highly recommend you try them out. Thank you to them for being a friend of the channel, but mostly for making these great products. Now back to the video. While both countries are in Asia, Saudi Arabia is in the Middle East, while Iran is in what people sometimes refer to as South Central Asia. Iran is 1.7 million square kilometers, while Saudi Arabia is 2.1 million square kilometers. The latter is bigger, but not by that much. Iran's capital is Tehran, while Saudi Arabia's is Riyadh. Iran's southern shores border the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf in the Indian Ocean, while their northern shores border the Caspian Sea. Iran's land territory borders Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan in the east, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey, and Iraq in the west. Iraq is in fact the only mutual border they have and sort of a buffer state between them. In addition to that, Saudi also borders Jordan, Kuwait, Yemen, Oman, the UAE, Qatar, and Bahrain, also having two coasts, the eastern one in the same Persian Gulf and the west one in the Red Sea. Historically, what is today Saudi Arabia was never a united territory in itself. It contained the Kingdom of Hejaz, the Sultanate of Najd, and most that were united through their belonging to the Ottoman Empire or the even earlier Abbasid Caliphate. Iran, however, or Persia, once ruled much of the Middle East through their Achaemenid Empire, although connecting that to modern Iran is a bit of a stretch. The predecessor of modern Iran, though, did hold more territory than it does today, losing significant amounts of it during the 19th and 20th centuries. This great map by Clement Young on Reddit shows that up north they lost a great deal of territory to Russia, while in the east they lost much to what was at the time territory controlled by the British, although they did gain a little from the Ottomans in the west, some of which they still hold today. And how does their terrain and climate in said territories compare? Climate-wise, Saudi Arabia is pretty much a desert, with the exception of the southwest, which is semi-arid. Summers in the central region are extremely hot and dry, ranging up to 43 degrees Celsius. Iran is similar, mainly arid and semi-arid, except the northern coastal areas and parts of western Iran, but the winter can also be very cold. This is mostly because of Iran's mountains, which as we can see make up most of the country, especially in the Zagros and Alborz chains. Saudi Arabia also has mountains, but not as much and seemingly not as tall, only in the west, with the east being more plains. Infrastructure is always a difficult thing to compare. You can't really find out how many hospitals or police stations each country has, so usually I tend to stick to two things: railways and roads. Both countries' rail networks are severely limited. I think if one has more, it will be Iran. Saudi Arabia has less, although they do have some projects being built. Plus, a lot of their country is desert, so there's not really much sense and practicability in having railways across it. When it comes to highways, however, Saudi Arabia seems to have a more developed network, with Iran seemingly abandoning the western part of their country when it comes to high-speed roads. And what about the people that live in these countries? Iran's population is almost 3 times that of Saudi, 87 million versus 36 million. Iran is also considerably denser in terms of population, with 50 inhabitants per square kilometer, while Saudi Arabia only has 16. In these population density maps, this becomes clear as well. They have a similar average age of 30-31, showing us they don't really have an aging population. This is helped a little by migration. While Iran has a net migration of minus 0.3, Saudi Arabia has a positive one of plus 6, meaning more people are coming in than they are leaving. The life expectancy in Iran is 75 years, in Saudi Arabia it is 77. Regarding the people's languages, the official language of Saudi Arabia is Arabic, with some slight regional variations, while Iran is more of a mixture of various local languages. Although most of the people speak Persian/Farsi, this ethno-linguistic map shows us where other ethnicities exist and where other languages are spoken. Interestingly, it also shows us how the areas where Sunni Islam is followed are all in the border regions. Now let's move on to the economy. If we compare the GDP in power purchasing parity, Saudi Arabia is the 17th biggest economy in the world at 1.7 trillion USD, while Iran is the 22nd at 1.6 trillion. Both are doing pretty well on this. I'm gonna skip GDP per capita because I think it's a pointless statistic, and looking instead at the Gini coefficient, which actually shows us how this wealth is distributed among the population. The highest value of the Gini coefficient, the more concentrated the wealth is, and the less distributed among all. Saudi Arabia's value is at 45%, ranking 127th worldwide. Iran is further up, so better, with 41%. This means that in both countries, a small minority has most of the wealth. Currency-wise, Saudi Arabia uses their rial. 1 rial equals 0.24 euro cents or 0.24 US cents in June of 2023. Their currency is pegged to the US dollar at a constant rate of exchange. Iran's currency is also called rial, but without the Y. Some people state the origin of the common term is the old Spanish currency real, also meaning regal. It seems odd that this would be the case for the region though. In June 2023, the unemployment rate of Saudi is 8%, in Iran it is 11.5%. The minimum wage in Iran in USD is about $600. In Saudi Arabia, the private sector seemingly has no minimum wage, but the public sector does, and it's equivalent to $800. When it comes to Human Development Index, which essentially measures quality of life through education, healthcare, etc., Saudi Arabia ranks 35th with 0.87, while Iran ranks 76 with 0.77. Neither country is famous for having great human rights. An Oxford list that ranks countries worldwide on this topic, from 0 to 1, 1 being ideal, lists Saudi Arabia at 0.14, an extremely low value, and Iran at 0.22. On this aspect, they are pretty similar. Freedom House also identifies each country's press as being not free. So, that is how Saudi Arabia and Iran compare over a bunch of different factors. They are similar in many ways, but also pretty different on a ton of others. What do you think? Are the two countries comparable, and who comes out on top? Let me know in the comments along with your suggestions of which two countries or regions I should compare next. Thanks for watching this video, subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.